The crack of a rifle shattered the dawn's silence as James Blackwood dove behind a boulder, bullets splintering bark inches from his head. Blood trickled from a graze on his temple, and his breath came in controlled bursts as he counted. 3 shooters, maybe 4. Through gun smoke, he glimpsed Apache warriors advancing through the pines, war paint stark against the morning light. Trapped like a goddamn greenhorn, he muttered, checking his Colt single-action army. 4 rounds left. 15 years on the frontier had taught him one thing: a cornered man makes decisions that haunt him forever. 3 days earlier, the cold Arizona dawn painted the forest in amber and gray as James tracked a wounded buck through underbrush. 15 years as a frontier soldier had hardened his eyes and steadied his hands. His Springfield Model 1873 felt like an extension of himself, the walnut stock worn smooth from years of deadly service. "Come on, you stubborn bastard," he whispered, kneeling to examine crimson droplets on fallen pine needles. The blood trail told a story. The buck was faltering, moving erratically through the timber. The 45-70 government round had done its job. James preferred the Springfield's trapdoor action over newer models. The massive round had stopping power that mattered in these mountains. 1 shot, 1 kill. Just as Captain Montgomery had drilled into him during the Apache campaigns of '68. His finger traced a blood pattern, then froze. His pulse quickened as combat instincts screamed danger. This wasn't deer blood anymore. The pattern was wrong. Too much volume, and the droplets showed signs of a man staggering. Not an animal's gait. 20 minutes later, he found him. An elderly Apache slumped against a boulder, chest heaving with labored breaths. Multiple gunshot wounds peppered his torso. The man wore the traditional markings of a chief, but what stopped James cold were the distinctive facial scars, 3 parallel lines beneath each eye. "Chief Maka," James whispered, recognition hitting like a physical blow. The chief's eyes flickered open. Recognition and something else. Was it relief? Crossing his pain-racked face. "Black wood," he managed, blood bubbling at the corner of his mouth. "The circle closes." The words sent a chill down James's spine. 5 years ago, at the Battle of Raven Creek, James had led the cavalry charge that decimated Maka's village. The screams still visited him in nightmares. "Who did this to you?" James asked, already tearing strips from his undershirt to bind the worst wounds. Chief Maka gripped James's wrist with surprising strength. "My brother's son, coma." The old man's eyes burned with urgency. "They plan war. Your people, my people, all will burn." He coughed violently, spraying blood. "The papers, Fort, Reynolds." The chief passed out as James hoisted him onto his shoulders. The cabin was 2 miles away, a hard march uphill with a wounded man who, by all rights, should want him dead. By the time James kicked open his door, both men were covered in blood, and the chief's breathing had grown dangerously shallow. Working methodically, James cut away the bloodied buckskin shirt. 15 years as a soldier meant he'd patched more bullet holes than most surgeons. The first bullet had shattered Maka's collarbone. The second had pierced his side, likely puncturing a lung. The third remained embedded near his spine. "Hang on, you old warrior," James muttered, heating his hunting knife in the fireplace flames. "I've got a lot of questions only you can answer." As he worked through the night, memories flooded back. The wife and daughter he'd lost to smallpox in '72. The battles he'd fought, the men he'd killed, the day he'd turned his back on the uniform, the day Captain James Blackwood had died, at least in his own mind. If you've ever had to make the hard choice between your past and your conscience, stay with me, James said to himself as he stitched the chief's wounds by lamplight. This is a story about honor, betrayal, and redemption in a land that forgives none of them. 3 hours before dawn, the floorboard near the stove creaked. James's eyes snapped open, hand already closing around the Colt beneath his pillow. He remained motionless, breathing steadily as a shadow moved across the cabin. The intruder approached the bed where Chief Maka lay unconscious. Moonlight through the window glinted off a steel blade. James cocked the hammer with his thumb, the distinctive click freezing the shadow in place. "I've buried 47 men in these mountains," he said, voice hard as iron. "Most of them never saw me coming. You won't be number 48 unless you're stupid. Drop the knife." The figure turned, a woman tall and strong, with the unmistakable bearing of an Apache warrior. High cheekbones, obsidian eyes that showed no fear, and a hunting knife that looked perfectly at home in her hand. "You are the soldier Blackwood," she said, her English clear but accented. "The butcher of Raven Creek." The title hit like a physical blow, but James didn't flinch. "And you're trespassing in my home with a knife drawn. Not exactly the proper way to thank the man who spent all night keeping your chief alive." Her eyes narrowed, glancing between James and the chief. "My father would not seek help from a bluecoat killer. Your father didn't have much choice, bleeding out with 3 bullets in him." James nodded toward the bloodied bandages and medical supplies scattered across the table. "Check his wounds if you don't believe me. I dug out what I could, but 1 bullet's too deep. He needs a real doctor." The woman approached her father, knife still ready. She examined the bandages with expert hands, noted the careful stitching, the herbal poultices. "I am Nara," she finally said, lowering her knife slightly. "Daughter of Chief Maka." Her eyes hardened. "Why would you help him? You who led the charge that killed my mother and brother." The accusation hung in the air between them. James set his revolver on the bedside table, but within easy reach. "Because I've seen enough death." His voice roughened. "I lost my Sarah and little Emma to the pox. Same year as Raven Creek. Maybe that's why I followed orders without question then." He met her gaze directly. "I'm not that man anymore." Something shifted in Nara's expression. Not forgiveness, but perhaps understanding. "My father awoke briefly before sunset. He spoke of betrayal." "Coma," James said. "He mentioned that name." Nara's face darkened. "My father's nephew, once a respected warrior, now he conspires with your bluecoat chief Reynolds." "Colonel Samuel Reynolds? Fort Richardson?" "They plan raids on settlements. Apache warriors attack white farmers. White soldiers attack Apache camps. Both sides blame each other while Reynolds and Coma profit." Nara's voice carried the deadly calm of someone stating facts, not accusations. "When enough blood is spilled, the government will remove all Apache. Reynolds and his men in Washington will control everything." "The railroad," James said, pieces clicking into place. "The southern routes being decided next month." Nara nodded. "Land that will be worth fortunes. My father discovered this conspiracy. He confronted Coma 3 days ago, then disappeared. And you tracked him here, following his blood trail, as he followed Coma's." Her eyes hardened. "They plan to attack Canyon Creek Settlement tomorrow at dawn, disguised as Apache raiders. 20 warriors, 15 white mercenaries." James ran a hand through his graying hair. "And you plan to stop them alone?" "I do not fear death." "Death doesn't care if you fear it or not," James replied, pulling a battered tin cup from a shelf and pouring whiskey into it. "But if you're telling the truth, a lot of innocent people, white and Apache both, are going to die unless someone stops this." He offered her the cup. After a moment's hesitation, she accepted. "Why would you help?" Her eyes bore into his. "This is not your fight." James looked at the wounded chief, then back to the woman who'd come to kill him, and instead found an unlikely ally. He thought of Sarah and Emma, of the Apache children at Raven Creek, of the nightmares that still woke him, sweating and reaching for his gun. Maybe it's time it was. By mid-morning, they had formulated a plan. James spread a crude map of the territory across the kitchen table, weighing down the corners with stone mugs. Diablo Canyon has only 3 approaches, he explained, tracing the routes with a calloused finger. Main entrance here, narrow pass to the north, and this game trail that cuts along the eastern ridge. Nara leaned over the map. The eastern trail is watched by scouts, which is why they won't expect us to use it. James tapped the spot. I'll approach from the main entrance, posing as an arms dealer. Reynolds has been stealing military weapons for months. Springfield rifles, ammunition, even a Gatling gun according to rumors. A man offering more weapons would be welcomed. While you distract them, I position myself here. Nara indicated the high ridge overlooking the camp. If something goes wrong, you're my insurance. James reached for the Springfield leaning against the wall and handed it to her. Ever used one of these? Nara took the rifle, examining it with expert hands. Show me. For the next hour, James demonstrated the workings of the trapdoor action, how to load the 4570 cartridge, the proper way to sight down the barrel. 500 yards effective range, he explained, but in the right hands it'll reach further. He adjusted her grip slightly. Keep both eyes open when you aim. Most men make the mistake of closing one. As they worked, James noticed a scar running along her forearm, distinctive, deliberate cuts in a pattern he recognized. War medicine marks, he said. You were at Raven Creek. Nara's eyes met his. I was 14. I carried my brother from the flames. He died in my arms. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken accusations. I led that charge, James finally said, voice rough. Followed orders without question. It took losing my own family to understand what I'd done to yours. And now you help my father. The dead are dead. Nothing changes that. James turned back to the map. But the living still have choices. As dusk approached, Nara asked the question that had clearly been troubling her. You fought against my people for many years. What really made you stop? James stared out the window at the distant mountains. 4 years ago, my patrol was ambushed near Black Mesa. An Apache warrior found me wounded, arrow through my leg, half dead from blood loss. James unconsciously touched the scar along his temple. By all rights, he should have taken my scalp. Instead, he bound my wounds and left water. Never knew why. What was his name? Called himself Two Hawks. Something flashed across Nara's face. My mother's brother. He died last winter. James absorbed this, the weight of coincidence, or fate, settling on his shoulders. We leave at sunset. The attack on Canyon Creek happens at dawn. We need to reach Diablo Canyon tonight. The journey to Diablo Canyon took 5 grueling hours through rugged terrain. A mile from the canyon mouth, they separated, Nara taking the steep climb to the eastern ridge, while James continued toward the main entrance. The moon cast silver light on the sandstone cliffs as James approached the canyon, leading a pack mule laden with wrapped bundles. He changed into the clothes of a frontier trader. Duster coat, wide-brimmed hat pulled low. The guards, hard-faced men with Springfield rifles, stopped him at the narrow entrance. Hold it right there, one called, rifle raised. State your business. James raised his hand slightly. Name's Morgan. Heard there might be buyers for specialty merchandise in these parts. He patted one of the bundles. Quality weapons at fair prices for men with the right connections. The guards exchanged glances. Wait here, one said, disappearing into the canyon. 10 minutes later, a tall Apache man emerged, flanked by guards. Coma moved with the confident stride of a man accustomed to command. His face showed the family resemblance to Chief Maka, but where the old chief's eyes carried wisdom, Coma's held only cold ambition. You bring weapons to my camp, traitor? Coma asked, his English precise and cultured. These are dangerous times to travel alone. James played his role perfectly, the opportunistic merchant with no allegiances beyond profit. Dangerous times mean profitable times for men like us. he replied with a mercenary smile. I've got 10 Springfield rifles fresh from an Army supply wagon. Ammunition, too. Interest flickered in Coma's eyes. Come, we will discuss terms. The camp was impressively organized. Tents arranged in military formation, horses corralled in a natural pen, weapons stacked near fire pits. This was no raiding party. It was a professional military operation. White mercenaries and Apache warriors moved with the coordination of men trained to work together. Several wore pieces of U.S. Army uniform mixed with traditional clothing, disguises for the coming raid. As they walked, James noted a wagon partially covered with canvas. Beneath the covering, he glimpsed the distinctive shape of a Gatling gun. This wasn't just about raiding a settlement. They were planning a massacre. Coma led James to a large tent at the center of camp. Inside, maps were spread across a folding table, along with correspondence and supply manifests. James recognized military dispatch forms and territorial survey maps. Impressive operation, James commented, eyes scanning the documents while pretending to examine the tent. You planning something big? Coma poured whiskey into 2 tin cups. Perhaps, if you are the right kind of partner. He handed James a cup. Who sent you? No one sent me. I work for myself. James accepted the drink. Though I've done business with men who've mentioned your name. Colonel Reynolds. For one, the name drop had the desired effect. Coma's expression shifted subtly. Reynolds is a careful man. He does not speak of our arrangement to strangers. James shrugged. Men talk when they drink, and Reynolds has associates in Santa Fe who appreciate my discretion. He leaned closer. I know about Canyon Creek, and the larger plan. Territories changing, and smart men are positioning themselves ahead of it. Coma studied him with narrowed eyes. What exactly do you know? Enough to want in on it. James nodded toward the maps. Reynolds controls the military response. You provide the Apache threat to justify removal of all tribes from valuable territories. Meanwhile, your partners in territorial government secure land rights before the railroad announcement goes public. After a long moment, Coma smiled thinly. You are well informed for a simple arms dealer. Information is as valuable as bullets in my line of work. James sipped the whiskey. I need proof this operation has real backing before I commit my resources. Something to show my investors this isn't just another frontier scheme. Coma considered this, then pulled a document from a leather folio. Perhaps this will convince you. Official orders redirecting cavalry patrols away from tomorrow's targets, signed by Colonel Reynolds himself. James examined the document, memorizing the details while appearing merely interested. It was damning evidence. Military collusion in civilian attacks. But he needed more. The colonel's signature carries weight, James admitted. But what about higher up? The territorial governor's office must be involved for land transactions. You ask dangerous questions, Morgan. Coma's eyes narrowed. Men who move cautiously stay alive. James met his gaze steadily. Men who move blind end up dead or poor. I've been both. Don't care to be either again. Something in his tone, the hard-earned wisdom of a frontiersman who'd seen too much, resonated with Coma. The Apache leader reached into a wooden chest and withdrew more documents. Correspondence with government officials, maps of planned railroad routes not yet public, land claim certificates pre-signed and ready for filing. Tomorrow's raid is just the beginning, Coma explained, pride loosening his tongue. By month's end, the Apache threat will justify the largest military operation since the war. All tribes removed or exterminated. And your people? James asked, keeping his voice neutral. Those loyal to me will have a reservation in the north. Small, but safe. Coma's expression hardened. The old ways are dying, Morgan. The future belongs to those who adapt. Like your uncle adapted? The words slipped out before James could stop them. Coma's head snapped up. What do you know of Maca? James recovered quickly. Only rumors. That he opposed the plan. That he disappeared. Coma's face darkened. Maka was a fool clinging to old ways. He would have us all dead for his honor. He spat the last word like a curse. To profitable partnerships, then, James said, raising his cup in toast, seizing the moment to redirect. And to men who understand the changing times. Coma raised his cup, and in that moment, James threw the whiskey into his eyes and drove his fist into the man's throat. As Coma staggered backward, choking, James swept the most damning documents into his coat and bolted for the tent entrance. Shouts erupted across the camp as he threw himself onto his horse. He'd barely made it 30 yards when the first bullets whined past his head. Keeping low in the saddle, he spurred the animal toward the canyon mouth, zigzagging between boulders for cover. Behind him, Coma had recovered enough to scream orders in Apache and English. Riders mounted in pursuit, rifles cracking in the night air. Then came the distinctive boom of a Springfield from the eastern ridge. One of Coma's men toppled from his horse. A second shot, and another pursuer fell. Nara was covering his escape with deadly precision. James reached the canyon entrance as more shots rang out from the ridge. He pushed his horse hard along the trail they'd marked earlier, making for their rendezvous point 2 miles east. 15 minutes of hard riding brought him to the clearing where Nara waited, rifle still smoking in her hands. "Did you get what we need?" she asked as he dismounted. James pulled the documents from inside his coat. "Enough to hang Reynolds and half the territorial government, but Coma knows we're coming for him now." "And he has the Gatling gun," James added grimly. "They're planning more than raids. They want a massacre big enough to justify full military intervention." Nara swung onto her horse with practiced grace. "Then we ride for Fort Richardson tonight. General Harrington must see these before Coma reaches Reynolds." They rode through the night, pushing their horses to the limit. James took a bullet graze across his upper arm during their escape, and Nara had bound it with strips torn from her shirt. As dawn broke, they spotted a patrol of cavalry scouts. 6 men wearing the blue of the 4th Cavalry, James's old unit. The sergeant recognized him immediately. "Captain Blackwood? Good God, sir! We thought you were dead." "Not yet, Sergeant Miller." James dismounted stiffly. "We need to reach Fort Richardson immediately. Canyon Creek Settlement is in danger." Miller's eyes narrowed at the sight of Nara. "Sir, that's an Apache woman." "She's with me," James said firmly, "and she's just helped save dozens of American lives. Now get us to General Harrington." General William Harrington was a career military man with a reputation for strict discipline and unwavering integrity. At 60, his face mapped decades of frontier service, but his eyes remained sharp as steel traps. He looked up from his desk as James was shown in, recognition followed by surprise crossing his weathered features. "Blackwood? Good God, man. I thought you disappeared into the mountains for good." "General." James stood at attention out of ingrained habit. "I apologize for my appearance, but I bring information that can't wait." James placed the stolen documents on the desk. "There's a conspiracy involving Colonel Reynolds at Fort McKinney. He's orchestrating false Apache raids on settlements to justify seizing tribal lands for railroad interests." Harrington's bushy eyebrows rose as he examined the papers. "These are serious accusations against a decorated officer." "The evidence is there, sir. Official orders diverting patrols, correspondence with territorial officials, pre-signed land certificates." James leaned forward. "They're planning to attack Canyon Creek Settlement at dawn tomorrow, disguised as Apache raiders." The general's expression hardened as he studied the documents. "If these are authentic..." "They are, sir. I took them myself from a camp in Diablo Canyon, led by an Apache named Coma, Chief Maka's nephew. He's working with Reynolds to eliminate both settlers and tribes that stand in their way." Harrington was about to respond when the door opened without a knock. Colonel Samuel Reynolds entered, immaculate in his blue uniform, followed by 2 armed soldiers. His handsome face showed only mild curiosity, but his eyes betrayed alarm at seeing James. "General, I was informed we had an unexpected visitor." Reynolds glanced at the documents spread across the desk, his composure slipping momentarily. "Colonel Reynolds," Harrington said evenly, "Captain Blackwood here brings disturbing allegations." Reynolds recovered quickly. "Blackwood? The disgraced captain who abandoned his post after the Black Mesa incident?" He turned to the general. "Sir, this man was relieved of duty for mental instability following combat. His allegations cannot be trusted." "That's not true," James stood, facing Reynolds. "I resigned my commission. There were no charges. After you claimed Apache spirits were communicating with you," Reynolds countered smoothly. "You've been living alone in the wilderness for years, Blackwood. Clearly your condition has worsened." James noticed Reynolds' right hand drifting toward his sidearm, thumb caressing the hammer guard. "What evidence supports your claims, Blackwood?" Harrington asked. "Beyond these papers, which could be forgeries." Before James could answer, commotion erupted in the outer office. The door burst open, and Nara entered, held at gunpoint by two soldiers. "Found this Apache woman sneaking around the perimeter, sir," one reported. "Says she knows this man." Reynolds' face drained of color at the sight of Nara. "General Harrington," James said quickly, "this is Nara, daughter of Chief Maka. She can confirm everything I've told you." "An Apache spy collaborating with a mentally unstable former officer," Reynolds scoffed. "Hardly credible witnesses." "I bring more than words," Nara said, her voice steady despite the rifles aimed at her. "I bring him." She nodded toward the door, where two more soldiers escorted a bound white man in dusty clothes. "Found him hiding in her horse's saddlebags, sir," a corporal explained. "Says he has information about Colonel Reynolds." The man, gaunt, with the hard eyes of a mercenary, looked directly at Reynolds. "Tell them, Colonel, or I will. About the weapons, the fake raids, all of it." "This is Travis Carter," James explained, "one of Reynolds' mercenaries from the camp." Nara convinced him to testify. Reynolds' hand moved toward his sidearm, but Harrington's voice cracked like a whip. "Touch that pistol, and my men will drop you where you stand, Colonel." Reynolds froze, then slowly raised his hands. "This is a mistake, General. I've been investigating these rumors myself. Blackwood has stumbled into an operation already underway." "Is that why you redirected the 2nd Cavalry away from Canyon Creek tomorrow?" James asked, pointing to one of the documents. "Or why you've been supplying weapons to Coma, including a Gatling gun?" Reynolds' face contorted with rage. "You have no idea what's at stake. The Apache problem requires a permanent solution. Washington lacks the stomach for what needs to be done." "And the railroad land grants?" Harrington asked quietly. "Your stake in those is just coincidental?" The colonel's silence was damning. The next hour unfolded with military efficiency. Reynolds was placed under arrest, his quarters searched, revealing more incriminating documents. Telegrams were dispatched to Fort McKinney and territorial authorities. A cavalry detachment was ordered to Diablo Canyon to apprehend Coma and his men. By noon, General Harrington had assembled his officers to announce the conspiracy's discovery and the immediate measures being taken. James and Nara stood to one side, their unlikely alliance having prevented a catastrophe. "You've done this territory a great service," Harrington told them privately afterward. "The Army would welcome you back, Captain Blackwood." James shook his head. "My soldiering days are behind me, General. But I'd appreciate help for Chief Maka. He needs proper medical attention." "I'll send our surgeon with you immediately," Harrington promised. He glanced at Nara. "Your father is a wise man. When he recovers, tell him I hope to discuss a real peace between our peoples, not the false one Reynolds planned." The aftermath unfolded over the following weeks. Reynolds' network collapsed under investigation, implicating territorial officials, land speculators, and military officers. Coma escaped into the mountains with a handful of followers, but without Reynolds' support, his power quickly diminished. General Harrington, true to his word, initiated peace talks with the Apache tribes. Chief Maka, recovering from his wounds at James's cabin, became a central figure in these negotiations. James declined Harrington's offer to rejoin the army, instead focusing on expanding his small homestead. Using his carpentry skills, he added 2 rooms to the cabin and began constructing a proper barn using techniques he learned from his father in Kentucky. One evening, as autumn painted the mountains in burnished copper, Nara arrived at his cabin. She'd been absent for weeks, having returned to her people after her father's recovery. "The soldiers captured Coma yesterday," she announced without preamble. "He will face tribal justice before facing yours." James nodded, continuing to shape a wooden beam for his barn. "Good. Reynolds goes before a military tribunal next month." Nara watched him work, appreciating the precision of his movements. "My father leads our people now in the new agreement with your government. We will have protected lands in the mountains, smaller than before, but ours by law." "Harrington is a man of his word," James replied. "If anyone can make this peace last, it's him." A comfortable silence fell between them, 2 warriors who had found common purpose and mutual respect. "I am returning to my people tomorrow," Nara finally said. "We establish our winter camp in the high valleys." James set down his tools and faced her. "You're welcome here anytime. Your father, too." She smiled, a rare expression that transformed her serious face. "Perhaps when the snow eagle returns in spring." She reached inside her deerskin shirt and pulled out a small carved wooden hawk. 2 hawks made this. He said a bluecoat once spared his life, that some debts transcend blood feuds. James accepted the carving, fingers tracing the detailed wings. "The circle closes," he murmured, echoing Chief Maka's words. Nara extended her hand in the white man's custom of farewell. "Until spring, Blackwood." James took her hand, feeling the strength in her grip. "Until spring, Nara." 1 year later, James stood on the ridge overlooking his expanded homestead. The cabin had grown into a proper ranch house. A trading post now stood at the edge of his property, a neutral ground where settlers and Apache alike could exchange goods without fear or prejudice. The sound of hoofbeats drew his attention. A lone rider approached, Chief Maka, straight back despite his age and past wounds. "Blackwood," the chief greeted him, dismounting with the dignity of a man who had led his people through war and peace. "I bring news. The last of Coma's followers have surrendered." "Good," James replied, "though I doubt we've seen the last of men like him, or Reynolds." "There will always be those who choose power over honor," Maka agreed, "which is why we need men who choose differently." They walked together toward the trading post, where settlers and Apache were engaged in commerce and conversation. "You've built something here," Maka observed, "something neither of us could have imagined at Raven Creek." James thought of Sarah and Emma, of the blood he'd spilled and the redemption he'd found. "A man can't change his past, Chief, but he can choose his future." As the sun set behind distant peaks, James reflected on the journey that had brought him here, from soldier to hermit to bridge builder. The ghosts of his past would always be with him, but they no longer controlled his future. Sometimes, the most important battle isn't what we fight against, but what we fight to protect. If you face difficult choices between your past and your conscience, share your experience in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this frontier tale of honor and redemption, hit that subscribe button for more stories where American grit meets frontier justice. Until next time, this is Frontier Chronicles signing off.